it points to one of two things: either atrocious leadership and discipline, or it is a systemic weapon of war to terrorize the Ukrainians.
There's been some imagery, awful imagery, circulating on social media from Ukraine of a Ukrainian soldier's head on a spike in Bakhmut. It looks like I don't know, an echo of medieval times. What do you make of that? In as far as one can make anything of that, I suppose it's the kind of savagery on the battlefield which has been associated with Russian forces.
Sadly, that is the case. We should be horrified. We should call it out. We should denounce it. But the one thing we probably shouldn't be is surprised by it. The Russian military, and possibly in this case the Wagner Group, have demonstrated their willful ignorance of the law of armed conflict. They've conducted horrific atrocities over the last 12, 13 months. So we sadly should not be surprised by this, assuming the image is correct. It's one of the awful things about the internet is these sort of images bounce around and people seem to take almost perverse pleasure from watching them.
I mean, we've seen many an example of savagery carried out by Russian forces in this war, and certainly in the past. I just wonder, how is it that the military of Russia, including people like the Wagner Group, the private army, which is working with Russia here, how do they think this in any way serves their purpose, this kind of brutality?
It's really hard to see, isn't it? I mean, I think that I served in the kind of campaign against ISIS, Daesh. And you remember that they used brutality as an absolute weapon of war. These very professional videos of beheadings that would come out, and for them it was kind of part of their ideology, and it was a deliberate tactic. So we worked very hard to kind of suppress that and try and avoid their imagery of brutality that they wanted us to see, to try and avoid those being exploited by ISIS. But I agree with you. How Russian military, on the face of it, professional military organization, could see that would further their war aims is extraordinary. It points to one of two things: either atrocious leadership and discipline, or it is a systemic weapon of war to terrorize the Ukrainians. But again, 12, 30 months in, they should recognize that it's simply not working.
Yeah. Now, away from Ukraine for a moment, a story which has made a lot of headlines. The report that the late Queen wanted both of her sons to serve in Afghanistan. Prince William, he was kept from going to war for security reasons. What do you think of that as a former serving senior officer?
Well, actually, I remember vividly when Prince Harry first deployed in 2007. There was a very, very small circle of knowledge about his deployment. I was in a very much supporting role at the time, but I happened to be part of that small circle of knowledge. I know how very, very seriously the decision was taken to allow him to deploy. And one can see, it's one thing Prince Harry deploying, but Prince William at the time, I'm thinking he was second in line to the throne.
Yes,
that's a very, very big deal to allow him to deploy. And I think it's fantastic that that he was allowed to serve his nation in another way. And of course, he ended up as a helicopter pilot with their ambulance. And I think that's a fantastic thing, and actually gave a great deal of focus to that vital service.
and we know, of course, because the prince has discussed it in his writings, how Prince Harry was very much engaged in active service, engaged in combat. I wonder, how does an officer, just put yourself in that position? You've been in that position. How do you use a VVIP, a very, very important person like a royal prince, like Prince Harry, on active service? Because it's not like sending any officer into battle.
No, and to say his first deployment, he went with the Household Cavalry Regiment. And say there was a great deal of secrecy around that deployment, and he operated in very rural parts of Afghanistan. And after I forget how many months, it became public knowledge that he got into the media that he was there, and he had to be recovered back home. because not only did that pose a threat to him, but of course it posed a threat to the other soldiers around him.
Yes.
When he deployed the second time in 2012, he was a helicopter pilot flying an Apache attack helicopter. Now, Apaches engage the enemy at long range. They're a very, very advanced attack helicopter
Yeah.
designed for taking on, defeating the most advanced weapons in the world. And so, with the very, very greatest respect to him, and indeed to my colleagues who are helicopter pilots and flew in Afghanistan, they were engaging the enemy from a relatively safe position. It's not like he was on the ground with his bayonet fixed, fighting the enemy like the infantrymen. So, greatest respect, gave huge support to those fighting on the ground, but it allowed that judgment to be placed around allowing him to serve his nation, but not putting him too directly in personal harm's way.
Well, I'm John Pienaar, and if you found that interesting, we are here each day, Monday to Thursday, 5 o'clock till 7 o'clock on Drive, and from 7 till 8, Pienaar and Friends, where we discuss the big stories of the day each day on Times Radio.